Hiraṇyakaśipu and his followers have started chastising Prahlāda Maharaj, trying to kill him. And as we are seeing here, they are trying their best to kill Prahlāda Maharaj, but Prahlāda Maharaj is receiving complete protection from his Lord and Master, Lord Nrsimhadev, Lord Sri Krishna, however you want to look at it. So it is expressed that they were the demons, they were shouting and howling, making a lot of tumultuous sounds that chop him up, pierce him, and in this way they had been striking Prahlāda Maharaj. But Prahlāda Maharaj is peacefully sitting in meditation upon the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This is the scene. And who is describing these details? Narad Muni. Narad Muni is describing this to Yudhishthir Maharaj. And in the verse number 41, Narad Muni points out why it is so difficult for Hiraṇyakaśipu and his followers to inflict any harm to Prahlāda. It's a very important verse for us to look at. Even though a person who has no assets in pious activities performs some good deed, it will have no result. Thus, the weapons of the demons had no tangible effects upon Prahlāda Maharaj because he was a devotee undisturbed by material conditions and fully engaged in meditating and serving the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So Prahlāda was externally completely undisturbed by the conditions around him, and internally he was meditating upon and serving the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Now, why was Prahlāda not getting affected? It is pointed out through three qualities that are mentioned here of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The quality number 1, the Supreme Personality of Godhead who is unchangeable. Second, who cannot be realized by the material senses. And third, who is the soul of the entire universe. So if you reflect on these three qualities, you can see, because Prahlāda Maharaj was fixed on someone who is completely unchangeable, and therefore Prahlāda Maharaj's circumstances around him cannot inflict any kind of disturbance upon him, because he is hooking on to someone who is unchangeable. So his peaceful state, that is by dint of his mood of service, cannot be changed. Secondly, the Supreme Lord is someone who cannot be realized by material senses. Therefore, the demons would have no clue what's going on with Prahlāda Maharaj, how he is emerging unscathed. It is just impossible for them to fathom, because Prahlāda Maharaj is completely in touch with the Supreme Lord, but that Supreme Lord cannot be realized by the material senses. So they cannot figure it out. And because the Supreme Lord is the soul of the entire universe, the influence of the Supreme Lord is there upon not just Prahlāda Maharaj, but also upon the demons as well as the circumstances around. Because he is the supreme controller, and he can easily control the situation around Prahlāda Maharaj. So you can see these three qualities that are mentioned here are quite significant. So Prahlāda Maharaj was fully surrendered to receive Krishna's protection, and all Prahlāda Maharaj was doing is absorbed in the thought of the Supreme Lord, completely confident that the real protector is Krishna, the real maintainer is Krishna. If you think about the Sharanagati principles, the 6 principles of Sharanagati, that Anukulyasya Sankalpa Pratikulyasya Varjanam, So generally, there are, you know, you can say, deepening of surrenders through those principles. Particularly the Rakshashyati iti Vishwaso and Goptritve Varnam Tatha. These two are applicable at the level of the mind. And in this way, there is an internal contemplation of, or you can say there is an internal conviction on the part of Prahlad that Krishna will always give me protection. And there is a complete acceptance of the Supreme Lord as one's guardian and master. And Prabhupada, elsewhere, particularly in Chaitanya Charitamrita, he points out one very important element of that protection. So this is from Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya Lila 22:100, where he writes a very important statement. A devotee must be firmly convinced that Krishna will give him protection. And here is the important line. No one else can actually give one protection. And being firmly convinced of this is called faith. A devotee wants to remain always in the Lord's service. In this way, Krishna is merciful to his devotee and gives him all protection from the dangers found on the path of devotional service. And therefore, from a devotee standpoint, he or she should depend only on Krishna, considering him the only protector. And this, like having this firm conviction, is actually faith. So one may ask this question, that what about Parikshit Maharaj, who was cursed to die within 7 days? Why Krishna did not change the plan to save him from death? And for that matter, we also saw with King Chitraketu how Chitraketu became a demon, and then because of the curse of Parvati, and that demon was then killed by Indra. So why were they not offered protection? So we can reflect on what Lord Shiva highlighted as Chitraketu Maharaj's surrender in 6/17/28. This is just to kind of understand the very important principle of how devotees respond to different situations of life. And this particular verse is the key verse that is needed for us to understand the mood of Prahlāda Maharaj, that Narayana para sarve na kutaśchana vibhyati. That is 6/17/28. Very, very important verse for us to understand how a devotee can remain fearless in every circumstance of life. So there, it is pointed out that devotees solely engaged in the devotional service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead Narayana never fear any condition of life. For them, the heavenly planets, liberation, and the hellish planets are all the same. For such devotees are interested only in the service of the Lord. So the point is that in the case of Prahlāda Maharaj, what is going on is that regardless of whatever was inflicted upon him by Hiraṇyakaśipu and his followers, his faith in Krishna's mercy and protection was unshakable. And that steadiness in his relationship with Krishna is coming from the internal satisfaction that is born of the intimate relationship with Krishna. Okay, so now let's look at Prabhupada's purport to 41st verse, where Prabhupada discusses this point of Prahlād's full dependence on Krishna. Prahlāda Maharaj was constantly and fully engaged in thought of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. As it is said, Govinda Parirambhitaha. Prahlāda Maharaj engaged himself always in meditation, and thus he was protected by Govinda. Just as a small child on the lap of his father or mother is fully protected, a devotee in all conditions is protected by the Supreme Lord. Does this mean that when Prahlāda Maharaj was attacked by the demons, the Rakshasas, Govinda was also attacked by the demons? This is not possible. There have been many attempts by the demons to hurt or kill the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but he cannot be injured by any material means. Remember the quality that was mentioned? Cannot be realized by the material senses. He cannot be injured by any material means because he is always in transcendence. And this is the key point. So Prahlāda, because he was fixed in devotion, he was able to remain completely peaceful. And this is quite bothersome for Hiraṇyakaśipu, because Hiraṇyakaśipu was trying to kill Prahlāda in so many different ways. So it is pointed out in 43 to 44, these verses, how many ways Hiraṇyakaśipu tried to kill his son. And there are 11 different ways that are mentioned here. Okay. Prahlāda was thrown under the feet of elephants. That's number 1. Second, he was put into a pit of poisonous snakes. When those two failed, then they tried to subject Prahlāda Maharaj to black magic or illusory tricks. Then fourth, he was administered poison. Fifth, starvation. Sixth attempt, he was exposed to extreme cold. Seventh is he was subjected to strong winds. Eighth, they tried to burn him in fire. Ninth, they tried to drown him in water. 10th, they started throwing heavy stones to crush him. And 11th, he was thrown off a cliff, hurled from a mountain. So these are all the different ways in which Hiraṇyakaśipu and his followers, they were completely befuddled by looking at Prahlāda. Like, even after trying with all these different ways, they were not able to harm Prahlāda. And not only that, they tried to use these 11 different ways to kill Prahlāda. They tried each of these methods a number of times. And at the end, they were coming to this conclusion when Hiraṇyakaśipu found that he could not in any way harm Prahlāda, who was completely sinless. He was in great anxiety about what to do next. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur makes a very beautiful point in the commentary for 41, how Prahlāda was getting protected. He writes, this line is very beautiful. His body was connected with the Lord. Since it was previously said in 7.4.38 that he was embraced by Govinda, that is the Govinda Parirambhitaha. He was a child protected on the lap of his father. So the key point that Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur is highlighting is that his body was literally connected with the Lord, and he was receiving simply an embrace of the Supreme Lord while all of this is going on. So, in other words, Prahlad was almost like oblivious of all these terrible circumstances that were inflicted upon him. So, Hiranyakashipu imagined himself the all-powerful ruler of the universe. And this false conception underlined every thought he had, everything he did. But every action of Hiranyakashipu was stemming from his own delusion that he is the all-powerful supreme ruler of the universe. But if you look at Prahlad's situation, Prahlad's power did not come from himself or what he thought about himself, but it came from Krishna's willingness to protect Prahlad, Krishna's willingness to protect his own devotee, who was completely dependent on him. And therefore, Prahlad's power overwhelmed Hiranyakashipu's power and challenged all the delusions that Hiranyakashipu was carrying. So, fear is a conditioned soul's most prevalent emotion, reminding each one of us that we are fragile, insignificant beings living in this unstable world. But if the focus really goes to the all-powerful Supreme Personality of Godhead, then we are no longer dependent on the conditions that are there, which are always bound to be unstable in this material world. But we are dependent upon the stable protection of the Supreme Lord. And therefore Hiranyakashipu now is considering the situation very carefully. That I have used many ill names in chastising this boy Prahlad and devised many means of killing him. But despite all my endeavors, he could not be killed. Indeed, he saved himself by his own powers. So this is how Hiranyakashipu is thinking. Because he cannot see Vishnu's protective hands. So he saved himself by his own powers without being affected in the least by these treacherous and abominable actions. So this is his final contemplation. I can see that this boy's strength is unlimited. For he has not feared any of my punishments. He appears immortal. So who actually went through tremendous austerity for becoming immortal? It was Hiranyakashipu. But Hiranyakashipu is the one who is appearing to be weak because he is not dependent on the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He was dependent on his own prowess. And therefore he is facing the insecurity of his own heart. But in the case of Prahlāda, Prahlāda is not at all worried about becoming immortal or anything. He was simply connecting himself to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But who is actually appearing to be immortal? It is Prahlāda. Therefore, because of my enmity towards him, I shall die. This is Hiranyakashipu's conclusion. Or maybe this will not take place. So he is totally bewildered at this point. So we will see what happens next. I hope you can appreciate the protection Prahlāda Maharaj is receiving by virtue of his fixity in devotional service to the Supreme Lord, particularly always remembering and getting absorbed in the thoughts of Shri Krishna. Thank you very much.